Hi everyone. Today we're back and we will be moving into book or chapter 3 of the Odyssey, the Fitzgerald translation. The book chapter is called The Lord of the Western Approaches. So the Lord of the Western is referring to some of the kings to the west of where Telemachus lives or where Telemachus is heading. The first one's going to be King Nestor. The sun rose on the flawless brimming sea into a sky all brazen, all one brightening for gods immortal and for mortal men on ploughlands kind with grain. And facing sunrise, the voyagers now lay off Pylos town, compact stronghold of Neleus. On the shore, black bulls were being offered by the people to the blue-maned god who made the islands tremble. When we're talking about the blue-maned god, we're talking about Poseidon, and the islands trembling, we're talking about earthquakes. 9 congregations, each 500 strong, led out 9 bulls apiece to sacrifice, taking tripes to eat, while on their altars thigh bones and fat lay burning for the god. Here they put in, furled sail, and beached the ship. But Telemachus hung back in disembarking, so that Athena turned and said, now remember, Athena is still disguised. She is disguised as Mentor. So Telemachus knows that this presence is a godly presence, but she hasn't revealed herself. Not the least shyness now, Telemachus. You came across the open sea for this, to find out where the great earth hides your father and what the doom was that he came upon. Go to old Nestor, master charioteer, so we may broach the storehouse of his mind. Ask him with courtesy, and in his wisdom he will tell you history and no lies. But clear-headed Telemachus replied, Mentor, how can I do it? How approach him? I have no practice in elaborate speeches, and for a young man to interrogate an old man seems disrespectful. But the gray-eyed goddess, remember, gray-eyed goddess is her epithet that's going to be repeated every time we talk about Athena. But the gray-eyed goddess said, Reason and heart will give you words, Telemachus, and a spirit will counsel others. I should say the gods were never indifferent to your life. She went on quickly, and he followed her to where the men of Pylos had their altars. Nestor appeared enthroned among his sons, while friends around them skewered the red beef or held it scorching. When they saw the strangers, a hail went up, and all that crowd came forward, calling out invitations to the feast. Pisistratos, in the lead, the young prince, caught up their hands in his and gave them places on curly lambskins flat on the sea sand near Thrasymedes, his brother, and his father. He passed them bits of the food of sacrifice, and, pouring wine in a golden cup, he said to Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, Friend, I must ask you to invoke Poseidon. You find us at this feast, kept in his honor. Make the appointed offering then, and pray, and give the honeyed wine cup to your friend, so that he may do the same. He, too, must pray to the gods on whom all men depend, but he is just my age. You are the senior, so here I give the goblet first to you. So again, this is also very similar to in the first chapter when Athena comes disguised as Mentes to Telemachus, and Telemachus offers her hospitality, offers her food and wine, and just shows her deference, even though she's disguised as Mentes. Here we see Pisistratus, the young prince of Nestor, all right, it's one of the princes of Pylos, and he sees these strangers and immediately offers to, invites them to their feast and offers them food and wine. And then even more shows deference to the older of the two. So Athena, disguised as Mentor, looks older, and so of course the eldest gets the gift first. And he put the cup of sweet wine in her hand. Athena liked his manners and the equity that gave her precedence with the cup of gold, so she besought Poseidon at some length. Earthshaker, listen and be well disposed. Grant your petitioners everything they ask. Above all, honor to Nestor and his sons. Second, to every man of Pylos town, a fair gift in exchange for this hecatomb. Third, may Telemachus and I perform the errand on which last night we put to sea. This was the prayer of Athena, granted in every particular by herself. She passed the beautiful wine cup to Telemachus, who tipped the wine and prayed as she had done. Meanwhile, the spits were taken off the fire, portions of crisp meat for all. They feasted, and when they had eaten and drunk their fill, at last they heard from Nestor, Prince Charioteers. Now is the time, he said, for a few questions, now that our young guests have enjoyed their dinner. Who are you, strangers? Where are you sailing from? And where to down the highways of sea water? Have you some business here? Or are you now reckless wanderers of the sea, like those corsairs who risk their lives to prey on other men? And again, very similar to what Telemachus did when Athena first arrived in chapter 1. First, you offer food and hospitality, and then you ask questions. Very different from our society today, but very typical back in ancient Greece in this book, in this poem. Clear-headed Telemachus responded cheerfully, for Athena gave him heart. By her design, his quest for news about his father's wandering would bring him fame in the world's eyes. So he said, Nestor, pride of Achaeans, Neleus' son, you ask where we are from, and I can tell you. Our home port is under Mount Neon, Ithaca. We are not here on Ithacan business, though, but on my own. I want news of my father, Odysseus, known for his great heart, and I will comb the wide world for it. People say he fought along with you when Troy was taken. As to the other men who fought that war, we know where each one died, and how he died, but Zeus allotted my father death and mystery. No one can say for sure where he was killed, whether some hostile landsman or the sea. The storm waves on the deep sea got the best of him. And this is why I come to you for help. Tell me of his death, sir, if perhaps you witnessed it, or have heard some wanderer tell the tale. The man was born for trouble. Spare me no part of it for kindness' sake, but put the scene before me as you saw it. If ever Odysseus, my noble father, served you by promise kept or work accomplished in the land of Troy, where the Achaeans suffered, recall those things for me the way they were. So Telemachus asks, if Odysseus ever did anything for you, if you ever respected Odysseus, please tell me news of what happened to my dad, what happened to Odysseus, and just be honest with me. Then Nestor, prince of charioteers, made answer. Dear friend, you take me back to all the troubles we went through in that country, we Achaeans. Rough days aboard ship on the cloudy sea, cruising away for pillage after Achilles. Rough days of battle around Priam's town. Our losses then, so many good men gone. Ares, great Aias, lays there. Achilles lies there. Patroclus, too, the wondrous counselor, and my own strong and princely son, Antilochus, fastest man of them all, and a born fighter. Other miseries and many we endured there. Could any mortal man tell the whole story? Not if you stayed 5 years or 6 to hear how hard it was for the flower of the Achaeans. You'd go home weary and the tale untold. Think, we were there 9 years, and we tried everything, all stratagems against them, up to the bitter end that Zeus begrudged us. And as to stratagems, no man could claim Odysseus's gift for those. He had no rivals, your father, at the tricks of war. Your father? Well, I must say I marvel at the sight of you. Your manner of speech couldn't be more like his. One would say, no boy could speak so well. And all that time at Ilion, he and I were never at odds in council or assembly. So clearly Nestor and Odysseus really get along, and Nestor is showing how much he respected Odysseus's ability for strategy. We saw things the same way, had one mind between us, and all the good advice we gave the Argives. But when we plundered Priam's town and tower and took to the ships, God scattered the Achaeans. He had a mind to make homecoming hard for them, seeing they would not think straight nor behave, or some would not. So evil days came on them, and she who had been angered, Zeus's dangerous, gray-eyed daughter, did it, starting a fight between the sons of Atreus. Now, I think this is funny too, because if you remember, Nestor is talking to Telemachus and Mentor, or Mentor, Athena disguised as Mentor. So here he is, and he's saying, after the Trojan War and after we plundered Priam or Priam's town or Troy, he said, then Zeus's gray-eyed daughter, Athena, came and she started this fight between all of us. And Athena is sitting there listening to the story. First, they were fools enough to call assembly at sundown, unheard of hour. The Achaean soldiers turned out, soaked with wine, to hear talk about it from their commanders. Menelaus harangued them to get organized. Time to ride home on the sea's broad back, he said. But Agamemnon wouldn't hear of it. He wanted to hold the troops, make sacrifice, a hecatomb, something to pacify Athena's rage. Folly again to think he could move her. Will you change the will of the everlasting gods in a night or a day's time? The two men stood there hammering at each other until the army got to its feet with a roar and no decision, wanting it both ways. So pretty much They were having a party. It got late at night. That's when they decided to have a council to decide when to leave. And after a night of drinking and it's getting late, people are tired. Surprise, surprise, people are disagreeing and arguing with each other. That night no one slept well, everyone cursing someone else. Here was the bane from Zeus. At dawn we dragged our ships to the lordly water, stowed aboard all our plunder, and the slave women in the low hip girdles. But half the army elected to stay behind, with Agamemnon as their corps commander. The other half embarked and pulled away. We made good time, the huge sea smoothed before us, and held our rights when we reached Tenedos, being wild for home. But Zeus, not willing yet, now cruelly set us at odds a second time, and one lot turned, put back in the rolling ships under command of the subtle captain Odysseus. Their notion was to please Lord Agamemnon. Not I. I fled with every ship I had. I knew fate had some devilment brewing there. Diomedes roused his company and fled too, and later Menelaus, the red-haired king captain, caught up with us at Lesbos. While we mulled over the long sea route, unsure whether to lay our course northward of Chios, keeping the Isle of Syria off to port, or inside Chios, coasting by windy Mimas. We asked for a sign from heaven, and the sign came to cut across the open sea to Euboea and lose no time putting our ills behind us. The wind freshened astern, and the ships ran before the wind on paths of the deep-sea fish, making Geristos before dawn. We thanked Poseidon with many a charred thigh-bone for that crossing. On the fourth day, Diomedes' company, under full sail, put in at Argos port, and I held on for Pylos. The fair wind, once heaven set it blowing, never failed. So, what we see here is that most of the captains left immediately from Troy after that night where they started arguing. Most of them left, but when they left, Odysseus was with them, and then he decided to turn around to be with Lord Agamemnon. Now, in my background notes, I talked about how Lord Agamemnon, when he gets home, he's actually murdered, and it's interesting that it seems like the only other person who has not made it home is Odysseus. So turning back does not seem like it was the best decision. So this dear child was how I came from Troy, and saw no more of the others, lost or saved. But you are welcome to all I've heard since then at home. I have no reason to keep it from you. The Myrmidon spear-fighters returned, they say, under the son of lion-hearted Achilles, and so did Poeas' great son Philoctetes. Idomeneus brought his company back to Crete. The sea took not a man from him, of all who lived through the long war. And even as far as Ithaca, you've heard of Agamemnon, how he came home, how Aegisthus waited to destroy him, but paid a bitter price for it in the end. That is a good thing now, for a man to leave a son behind him, like the son who punished Aegisthus for the murder of his great father. You two are tall and well set up, I see. Be brave, you two, so men in times to come will speak well of you. Then Telemachus said, Nestor, pride of the Achaeans, Neleus' son, that was revenge, and far and wide the Achaeans will tell the tale in song for generations. I wish the gods would buckle his arms on me. I'd be revenged for outrage on my insidious and brazen enemies. But no such happy lot was given to me or to my father. Still, I must hold fast. To this Lord Nestor of Gerenia said, My dear young friend, now that you speak of it, I hear a crowd of suitors for your mother lives with you, uninvited, making trouble. Now tell me how you take this. Do the people side against you, hearkening to some oracle? Who knows, your father might come home some day, alone or backed by troops, and have it out with them. If gray-eyed Athena loved you the way that she did Odysseus in the old days, in Troy country, where we all went through so much, never have I seen the gods help any man as openly as Athena did your father. Well, as I say, if she cared for you that way, there would be those to quit this marriage game. And again, we're seeing this, right? Athena does help Odysseus a lot, and it's because she's the goddess of wisdom and war strategy. And what is Odysseus's big strength? His cleverness, his ability to have some war strategy. We're also seeing that Athena. What strange talk you permit yourself, Telemachus! A god could save the man by simply wishing it, from the farthest shore in the world. If I were he, I should prefer to suffer years at sea and then be safe at home, better than that knife at my hearthside where Agamemnon found it, killed by adulterers. Though, as for death, of course all men must suffer it. The gods may love a man, but they can't help him when cold death comes to lay him on his bier. Telemachus replied, Mentor, grievously though we miss my father, why go on as if that homecoming could happen? You know the gods had settled it already, years ago, when dark death came for him. But there is something else I imagine Nestor can tell us, knowing as he does the ways of men. They say his rule goes back over 3 generations, so long, so old, it seems death cannot touch him. Nestor, Neleus' son, true sage, say how did the lord of the great plains, Agamemnon, died? What was the trick Aegisthus used to kill the better man? And Menelaus, where was he? Not at Argos in Achaea, but blown off course, held up in some far country. Is that what gave the killer nerve to strike? Lord Nestor of Gerenia made answer. Well, now, my son, I'll tell you the whole story. You know yourself what would have come to pass if red-haired Menelaus, back from Troy, had caught Aegisthus in that house alive. There would have been no burial mound for him, but dogs and carrion birds to huddle on him in the fields beyond the wall, and not a soul bewailing him for the great wrong he committed. While we were hard pressed in the war at Troy, he stayed safe inland in the grazing country, making light talk to win Agamemnon's queen. But the lady Clytemnestra in the first days rebuffed him, being faithful still. Then, too, she had at hand as her companion a minstrel Agamemnon left attending her, charged with her care when he took ship for Troy. Then came the fated hour when she gave in. Her lover tricked the poet and marooned him on a bare island for the seabirds' picking, and took her home as he and she desired. Many thigh bones he burned on the gods' altars, and many a woven and golden ornament hung to bedeck them, in his satisfaction. He had not thought life held such glory for him. So what we have here is the story of, again, Aegisthus that Zeus was talking about early on. And Aegisthus was trying to win the hand of Agamemnon's wife, Lady Clytemnestra, while Agamemnon was fighting the Trojan War. Now, there was a minstrel, there was a poet, they are the same, who was kind of keeping watch on Clytemnestra. And so at first, Clytemnestra rejected Aegisthus because somebody was watching them. But then Aegisthus kind of got rid of the poet. He maroons him on an island. And after that, Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, they start having an affair. And when Agamemnon comes back, it does not end well for him. Now Menelaus and I sailed home together on friendly terms from Troy. But when we came off Sunian Point in Attica, the ship still running free, Onotor's son, Phrontius, the steersman of Menelaus's ship, fell over with a death grip on the tiller. Some unseen arrow from Apollo hit him. No man handled the ship better than he did in a high wind and sea, so Menelaus put down his longing to get on, and landed to give this man full honor and funeral. His own luck turned then. Out on the wine-dark sea, in the murmuring holes again, he made Cape Melia, but Zeus, who views the wide world, sent a gloom over the ocean, and a howling gale came on with seas increasing, mountains parting the ships, and driving half toward Crete, where the Kydonians live by Iardanos River. Off Gorton's coastline in the misty sea, there a reef, a razorback, cuts through the water, and every westerly piles up a pounding surf along the left side, going toward Phaistos. Big seas buffeted back by the narrow stone. They were blown here and fought in vain for sea room. The ships kept going in to their destruction, slammed on the reef. The crews were saved. But now those 5 that weathered it got off to the southward, taken by wind and current onto Egypt, and there Menelaus stayed. Okay, if you're a little bit lost, just know that this is a lot of description of how Menelaus was traveling back with Nestor. They were kind of together in the same place. And then Menelaus had a what did they call it? They had a steersman who died. And so when Menelaus went and moored his ship in order to give him a burial, they got stuck on this island. And then eventually they shifted south. Okay. So it's mostly saying, how did they get separated? So Menelaus is in Egypt, and he made a fortune in sea traffic among those distant races. But while he did so, the foul crime was planned and carried out in Argos by Aegisthus, who ruled over golden Mycenae 7 years. Sorry for the pronunciation of many of these. 7 long years with Agamemnon dead, he held the people down before the vengeance. But in the 8th year, back from exile in Attica, Orestes killed the snake who killed his father. He gave his hateful mother and her soft man a tomb together and proclaimed the funeral day a festal day for all the Argive people. So here we have it. When Agamemnon came back, Aegisthus and Agamemnon's wife killed Agamemnon. Then, when Orestes grew of age, when he became a man, he comes back and he kills Aegisthus and his own mother, all right, and makes the day that they die a festival day. That day Lord Menelaus of the great war cry made port with all the gold his ships could carry. And this should give you pause, my son. Don't stay too long away from home, leaving your treasure there, and brazen suitors near. They'll squander all you have or take it from you, and then how will your journey serve? I urge you, though, to call on Menelaus, he being but lately home from distant parts in the wide world. A man could well despair of getting home at all if the winds blew him over the great South Sea. That weary waste even the wintering birds delay, one winter more before the northward crossing. Well, take your ship and crew and go by water, or if you'd rather go by land, here are horses, a car, and my own sons for company as far as the ancient land of Lacedaemon, and Menelaus, the red-haired captain here. There. Ask him with courtesy, and in his wisdom he will tell you history and no lies. While Nestor talked, the sun went down the sky, and the gloom came on the land. And now the grey-eyed goddess Athena said, Sir, this is all most welcome and to the point, but why not slice the bulls' tongues now, and mix libations for Poseidon and the gods? Then we can all retire. High time we did. The light is going under the dark world's rim. Better not linger at the sacred feast. When Zeus's daughter spoke, they turned to listen, and soon the squires brought water for their hands, while stewards filled the wine bowls and poured out a fresh cup full for every man. The company stood up to fling the tongues and a shower of wine over the flames, then drink their thirst away. Now finally Telemachus and Athena bestirred themselves, turning away to the ship, but Nestor put a hand on each and said, now Zeus forbid, and the other gods as well, that you should spend the night on board and leave me as though I were some pauper without a stitch, no blankets in his house, no piles of rugs, no sleeping soft for host or guest. Far from it. I have all these, blankets and deep-piled rugs, and while I live, the only son of Odysseus will never make his bed on a ship's deck. No, not while sons of mine are left at home to welcome any guest who comes to us. Again, a wonderful example of hospitality. Just this idea that Telemachus and Athena, disguised as mentor, were about to go back to their ship to sleep on their ship. And Nestor says, no, you have to sleep at my house. You have to enjoy the hospitality of my house. It would be an insult to me if you went back to the ship, because it would be like saying, I'm too poor to take care of you. The gray-eyed goddess Athena answered him, you are very kind, sir, and Telemachus should do as you ask. That is the best thing. He will go with you and will spend the night under your roof. But I must join our ship and talk to the crew, to keep their spirits up, since I am the only senior in the company. The rest are boys who shipped for friendship's sake. No older than Telemachus, any of them. Let me sleep out, then, by the black hole's side, this night at least. At daybreak, I'll be off to see the Cauconians about a debt they owe me, and an old one and no trifle. As for your guest, send him off in a car with one of your sons, and give him thoroughbreds, a racing team. Even as she spoke, Athena left them, seeming a sea hawk in a clap of wings, and all the Achaeans of Pylos town looked up astounded. Awed then by what his eyes had seen, the old man took Telemachus's hand and said warmly, okay, so in this scene, unlike earlier, the very first chapter, when Athena leaves Telemachus, it talks about how she left as if like a bird flying away. And in that moment, they were talking about it's a simile. She left very quickly. All right, so Telemachus had this feeling that she was a god, but he didn't know. Here we have Athena saying, okay, you take care of Telemachus. I'm going to leave now. And I have a debt I have to take care of. And she literally turns into a bird in front of them and flies away. And everyone is just watching, saying, what just happened? This is incredible. So, my dear child, I can have no fears for you, no doubt about your conduct or your heart, if at your age the gods are your companions. Here we had someone from Olympus, clearly the glorious daughter of Zeus, his third child, who held your father dear among the Argives. O lady, hear me. Grant an illustrious name to me and to my children and my dear wife. A noble heifer shall be yours in sacrifice, one that no man has ever yoked or driven, my gift to you, her horns all sheathed in gold. So he ended praying, and Athena heard him. Then Nestor of Gerenia led them all, his sons and sons-in-law, to his great house, and in they went to the famous hall of Nestor, taking their seats on thrones and easy chairs, while the old man mixed water in a wine bowl with sweet red wine, mellowed 11 years before his housekeeper uncapped the jar. He mixed and poured his offering, repeating prayers to Athena, daughter of royal Zeus. The others made libation and drank deep. Then all the company went to their quarters, and Nestor of Gerenia showed Telemachus under the echoing eastern entrance hall to a fine bed near the bed of Pisistratus, captain of spearmen, his unmarried son. Then he lay down in his own inner chamber, where his dear faithful wife had smoothed his bed. When dawn spread out her fingertips of rose, again, every time there's a new day and they talk about dawn, dawn with a capital D, they're referring to the goddess of dawn who is bringing the dawn, and that's why she's spreading out her fingertips of rose. It's a really beautiful image. Lord Nestor of Gerenia, charioteer, left his room for a throne of polished stone, white and gleaming as though with oil, that stood before the main gate of the palace. Nellius here had sat before him, masterful in kingship, Nellius long ago a prey to death, gone down to the night of the underworld. So Nestor held his throne and scepter now, lord of the western approaches to Achaea. And presently his sons came out to join him, leaving the palace. Echephron and Stratios, Perseus and Aretos and Thrasymedes, and after them the prince Pisistratus, bringing Telemachus along with him. Seeing all present, the old Lord Nestor said, Dear sons, here is my wish, and do it briskly to please the gods. Athena first of all, my guest in daylight at our holy feast. One of you must go for a young heifer and have the cowherd lead her from the pasture. Another call on Lord Telemachus's ship to invite his crewmen, leaving two behind. And someone else again send for the goldsmith, Laerces, to gild the horns. The rest stay here, together. Tell the servants a ritual feast will be prepared in hall. Tell them to bring seats, firewood, and fresh water. Before he finished, they were about these errands. The heifer came from the pasture, the crewmen of Telemachus from the ship. The smith arrived bearing the tools of his trade, hammer and anvil, and the precious tongs he handled fiery gold with, and Athena came as a god comes, numinous to the rites. The smith now gloved each horn in a pure foil beaten out of the gold that Nestor gave him, a glory and delight for the goddess's eyes, while Echephron and Stratios held the horns. Aretos brought clear lustral water in a bowl quivering with fresh cut flowers, a basket of barley in his other hand. Thrasymedes, who could stand his ground in war, stood ready with a sharp two-bladed axe for the stroke of sacrifice, and Perseus held a bowl for the blood. A little dark, but you know. And now Nestor, strewing the barley grains and water drops, pronounced his invocation to Athena and burned a pinch of bristles from the victim. When prayers were said and all the grain was scattered, great-hearted Thrasymedes in a flash swung the axe at one blow, cutting through the neck tendons. The heifer's spirit failed. Then all the women gave a wail of joy, daughters, daughters-in-law, and the lady Eurydice, Clymenus' eldest's daughter. But the men still held the heifer, shored her up from the wide earth where the living go their ways, until Pisistratus cut her throat across, the black blood ran, and life ebbed from her marrow. The carcass now sank down, and they disjointed shoulder and thigh bone, wrapped them in fat, 2 layers, folded with raw strips of flesh. These offerings Nestor burned on the split wood fire and moistened with red wine. His sons took up 5 tined forks in their hands, while the altar flame ate through the bones, and bits of tripe went around. Then came the carving of the quarters, and they spitted morsels of lean meat on the long, sharp tines and broiled them at arm's length upon the fire. And this is all a sacrifice being done for Athena. Polycaste, a fair girl, Nestor's youngest, had meanwhile given a bath to Telemachus, bathing him first, then rubbing him with oil. She held fine clothes and a cloak to put around him. Then he came godlike from the bathing place. Then out he went to take his place with Nestor. When the best cuts were broiled and off the spits, they all sat down to banquet. Gentle squires kept every golden wine cup brimming full, and so they feasted up to their heart's content until the Prince of Charioteers commanded. And what is Nestor's epithet? Prince of Charioteers. It's repeated over and over, meaning that he is well known for his horses and the chariots that he owns. Sons, harness the blood mares for Telemachus, hitch up the car, and let him take the road. They swung out smartly to do the work and hooked the handsome horses to a chariot shaft. The mistress of the stores brought up provisions of bread and wine, with victuals fit for kings, and Telemachus stepped up on the painted car. Just at his elbow stood Pisistratus, captain of spearmen, reins in hand. He gave a flick to the horses, and with streaming manes they ran for the open country. The tall town of Pylos sank behind them in the distance, as all day long they kept the harness shaking. The sun was low, and shadows crossed the lanes when they arrived at Pherae. There Diocles, son of Ortilochus, whom Alpheus fathered, welcomed the young men, and they slept the night. But up when the young dawn's fingertips of rose opened in the east, they hitched the team once more to the painted car and steered out eastward through the echoing gate, whipping their fresh horses into a run. That day they made the Greenlands of Lacedaemon, where, as the horses held to a fast clip, they kept on to their journey's end. Behind them, the sun went down and all the roads grew dark. So, one thing to remember is that there is a lot of lineage given in these books. There are a lot of names, and a lot of names that truly, in understanding the Odyssey, are not necessary. You do not need to know every father and every brother and every, grandchild. You need to know our main characters. So, anyway, hope you had a good day, and see you tomorrow.